Well, I got the framework for this driver's seat kind of dry, mocked up, making sure all the joints fit, and I haven't glued them together yet. I want to get into that. But there's something else that I would like to touch on, and it was a topic that was brought up when Keith Rucker from Vintage Machinery stopped here several weeks ago. And we were having lunch together and doing some visiting, and I asked him about Patreon. Asked him, do you do it? He said, well, I do, and it is helpful. So I have been kind of pondering that, and I've had some of you stop by the shop and ask me why I don't do it. Well, I don't know why I don't do it. It kind of goes back maybe to my childhood. And it seems odd that I would take it back that far. I can't blame my parents for everything. But back when I was young, I had an opportunity from my mother to mow the yard and do it for a complete summer. And that was fine with me. I liked mowing the grass. And her deal was totally up to me whether I wanted to be paid week by week, or if I would just as soon keep track of it and she would pay me lump sum at the end of the summer. Well, that's what I chose to do. I don't remember that I really needed the money week to week, so big lump sum at the end, that'd be pretty cool. But the stipulation was I had to keep track of it. She wasn't going to. Well, I am not very good at that type of stuff, and it continues on still to this day. But at the end of the summer, when it came to get paid, she was willing to pay me for the amount that I had actually kept track of. And probably 80% of that I did not. And so fast forward a few years, and I graduated high school and ended up going to college in Bozeman. And with the encouragement of a brother-in-law of mine, I went into agricultural business. Main word there that caught my attention was agriculture. Well, I got involved in anything but agriculture in my understanding. I ended up taking more computer science and economics. I didn't know there was this much economics in micro and macro and vertical and horizontal, and it was just like, where's the agriculture in this? So the money part, the economic part of it, still was not really an intriguing thing to me. Does that tie back to my childhood mowing the lawn? Maybe. So the common thread in all of this is the economics, monetary, finances, of which has never really been a big deal to me. So I understand that a business has to make money. I do get that. I was advised years ago by an elderly gentleman, I've referred to him before, and he said, the worst thing you can do for your customers is not charge enough money to stay in business, because when you go out of business, you're not doing anybody a service. So I get that, and I have used the economic schooling that I was forced to go through. I have, and I've used it. But money has never been a really big motivating factor to me. So this kind of ties into Patreon. I have drugged my feet about doing Patreon, mainly because it just hasn't been a big deal to me about the income part of it, but I'm beginning to understand that it is a big deal more to you as viewers because you can use it as a means to show your appreciation for what you watch twice a week. And I get that. And the economic part of me doing that is it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, and I have a fair bit of expense tied up in all my equipment to do this. So, I get all this, but this conversation with Keith Rucker has brought to the surface again my need to allow you to use the tool of Patreon. So all of this is to say, I finally broke down after 10 years now of in this YouTube world. I broke down and I created a Patreon account. Now there are supposed to be different levels, what they call tiers in that. I've just started out with one tier, and it may go from that. And so anyway, this is just an FYI that I have finally created a Patreon account for those of you that would like to support the channel. And numbers of you have done that by sending items. I mean, recently a Maglock featherboard has shown up, and books, and it just boggles my mind the generosity that you show for watching these videos, and I appreciate that. And all the people that are stopping by to visit the shop and go through the museum. It is really humbling, but I really enjoy visiting with you all and hearing your stories of what you've done all your life. So with all that blabbing going on, I do need to finish the framework on this driver's seat. Now there's a lot of 45 chamfering inside, and you'd think, well, it's out of sight, what's the big deal? But that's the thing about stagecoaches or of these finer vehicles. They have finish work to them that comes into the fashion style. It's not really a function issue, but it is a fashion issue. So I'm going to show you where some of this styling is done on the old ones, and I'm going to do it the same on this one and get ready to actually glue it together so it'll be here permanent as part of this coach. So this is the right side panel of the driver's box, which you're all familiar with. Well, this corner here is chamfered all the way down to the joint. This back vertical piece here is chamfered down to where it intersects with this cross frame. Then it stops, goes square, and then it's chamfered down to the main frame in the body. So I'm going to have to take all this apart to do this, but this gets chamfered on this corner, and then this corner gets chamfered down, and it stops where this cross frame is. It stops there and then picks up again as it goes down to the main body. And this is the back panel of the driver's seat, and so these two center braces, they get chamfered all the way down, and they stop just short of this cross brace. And then this is the top horizontal framework, and that gets chamfered in between each of these verticals. So these are going to get chamfered, and they just go right off the end on both sides. And right before the cross frame, it's going to actually stop right in this area here. And then in between each of these verticals, there's going to be a chamfer located between each of them. So you would think that since these are chamfered, that this would be chamfered as well, but on both old originals that I have, this corner has been left square. And on the front of this frame, these curved uprights are left square on this corner, and I have had some that have had this cross frame here chamfered. But the pattern that I have off of this 11 that I'm using, this is left square, so I'll probably leave this one square as well. So I'm just going to take this all apart, and I'll start with these two frames up here and just come up and work forward, kind of like how I went through the joint work. This time I'll fine tune them and actually glue them in place. And I'll probably glue them and clamp them and let that glue set, and then come back and put all the screws in. So I'm often asked why I don't plug these screw heads with the body filler like I did here, or the screws that are on the seat base. These are exposed, they are covered, but these get a wood panel that covers them as well as on the back. So all these screws are hidden, so they don't need to be covered. This gets a seat base frame on it where these would be covered, but the old ones were filled, and so I'm speculating that maybe they filled those just to keep moisture out of the screws. Well, I had mentioned earlier that Keith Rucker had stopped by and visited a few weeks ago, and he has his own YouTube channel where he restores old vintage machinery, and that's the name of his site, Vintage Machinery. And he was looking at this 1908 Fay and Egan saw that I have. Well, he noticed on my magnetic switch, since this is 3-phase, why I have an air coupling screwed into the face of my switch. He said, well, what's that all about? Well, I mentioned that when I had picked up this saw, it had the original 5-horse 3-phase motor on it. But that motor burnt up, so I went to my favorite shopping space, which is a salvage yard in Billings, and I found a motor that was comparable in size, but it was a 10-horse motor. So these switches have a thermal strip on them, he calls them a heater, that protects the motor. Well, I have a 5-horse heater bar or thermal switch on this magnetic switch that the 10-horse motor would trip. So, being cheapskate or farmer or whatever it is, I thought, well, I could just keep that cool. So I tapped a fitting for my air hose, and I just turn it down to a real slow volume air, and it keeps those heaters cool. Well, he looked at me, because this is what he does, is, you can fix that, Well, I suppose, but this is how Keith is wired. He said, let me look. And so he took a picture of these heater bars, and he said, let me look, and I'll see what I can find. Well, he found some. He said they were on eBay, and he sent them up so that I don't have to farmer cobble my magnetic switch for this table saw anymore. So this is an old General Electric switch. Like I say, it's just an old magnetic switch. When you kick it on, magnets clip all these switches closed. But these are the 2 heater bars or thermal strips that he said I could just easily change those, Well, I never did, They're not really a big deal to change. I just never took the time to hunt it up to do that. Well, he said they were an easy fix, but they kind of clip around this bar here. They have this little curled backside of. So these are the new ones that he sent. This is for the 5-horse, and he said these will work for the 10-horse. They seem a lot lighter to me, but he knows what he's doing. There's one side, and I need to do this side as well. Guess that's how it works. So now maybe I can get rid of this. Hook my power back up. Make sure it all works. So I wonder if those new heater bars being so much lighter, if maybe they cool down faster. Don't really know. That's why Keith does what Keith does. He knows all about this stuff. You know, I was visiting actually this week with somebody who is a cabinet maker, and he was commenting about how my joinery is right up there with cabinet makers' style of work. And I mentioned to him that over the years I have seen wagons that have been built by cabinet makers. And to me, as a carriage builder, they stand out like a sore thumb because they're built like cabinets, not like carriages or wagons. And this is one of those things about Keith Rucker. He looked at this and he said, that air chuck isn't supposed to be on there. What's all that about? It stood out to him like a sore thumb. Me, I just kind of, it's good enough, it'll work. So Keith knows what he's doing when it comes to old vintage machinery. And now this 1908 saw should work like it's supposed to, thanks to Keith Rucker. Visit his site. He's always restoring old antique machinery. Vintage machinery would probably be more correct. Anyway, yep, thanks again. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.